Today we're going to be working with perimeter, circumference, and area. With those three pieces, we're going to be working just with very basic steps. So this should all be review for you. And you have seen these formulas, worked with these formulas before in earlier math classes. So first one we're going to take a look at is the triangle. So in your interactive notebook, if you pull that triangle slip up, then you will see this other information that you see up on the board. Key thing with a triangle is the idea of the base and the height. Any one of the sides can be the base. The height then goes from whatever side you choose to be the base to the opposite vertex, okay, which means then it forms a 90-degree angle. Okay, the base and the height are perpendicular to each other. Sometimes when people are looking for height, they want to use that slanted piece, okay, which isn't the actual height. We need to go straight up to that point. Our formulas for area of a triangle: 1/2 times base times height. Another way you can think of that formula that some people like to do is base times height divided by 2. Because again, multiplying by 1/2 means we're dividing by 2. So if you would prefer to use that division formula, you can do that also. Perimeter, we're just adding the sides around the outside. So in a triangle, we just add those 3 sides together. Right now, as I talk about it, I'm going to move over to the rectangle and then come back to the square, because the square is just a special rectangle. But talking about rectangle, okay, in a rectangle, we know that the opposite sides are congruent, and we know that we have right angles in a rectangle. So when we are looking for area, we are multiplying the length times the width. Okay? Some publishers, some textbooks, some people, instead of saying length times width, they go back to those same words as what they did with a triangle and say base times height instead. Okay? Means the same thing. So length times width or base times height for area. When we're looking for perimeter, just like with the triangle, we're adding all 4 sides together, which you could certainly do. The formula that they show here, they just simplified, okay? Because we're going to have 2 L's and we're going to have 2 W's. All 4 of those pieces get multiplied together. So they just simplified it and wrote it 2L plus 2W. Another way that you could write that is to factor out that 2 and make it look like a distributive property problem. 2 times the quantity L plus W. Okay? So different ways that you can come up with, combine those sides. But essentially, you're still just adding the 4 sides together. So a square is just a special kind of rectangle in which all 4 sides are congruent. So it's not necessary to do anything different. You can use the area and perimeter formulas for a rectangle. They work for a square. What we see in our notes is just specific to the square. So instead of multiplying length times width, okay, our length times width are both the same. So we're saying S for side, side squared. Same thing as taking length times width or base times height. For perimeter, instead of saying we're adding S plus S plus S plus S, we're multiplying 4 times the length of the side. But again, if you want to use your rectangle formulas, that's fine. If you just want to add the 4 sides together, you can do that also. And then the last shape we're working with today is a circle. With our first three figures, which have sides and angles, we call those plane figures. Okay? A circle is not a plane figure. It doesn't have those angles. So instead of perimeter, the word they use for a circle is circumference. Circumference, though, is measuring around the outside of the shape, just like perimeter does for our plane figures. Right? Area is calculating the amount inside. So again, vocabulary that you're familiar with already with a circle. Diameter goes through the center point all the way through the circle. Radius is half of your diameter, goes just from the center to the outside of your circle. For area of a circle, our formula is pi times radius squared. For circumference, you have two different options. If they give you the diameter, you can just take pi times diameter. If they give you the radius, we know 2 times the radius gives you the diameter. So you can just take 2 times pi times radius. When we are working with circles, we are always going to leave our answers in terms of pi, which means we're going to leave that pi symbol in our answer. We're not going to multiply by the decimal approximation of 3.14, because we're not going to use calculators. We're just going to leave that pi symbol there, and we'll work through some examples here in a little bit. Other thing that I want to remind you of is labels. When we're finding perimeter, area, circumference, we need to label our answers. Okay, perimeter, circumference, okay, we're going to be using whatever the unit of measure is, whether it be centimeters, inches, feet, whatever the case may be. If they do not give you a unit of measure, you are going to use the generic term units. Okay, so you're always going to have a label of some kind on your answers. When we're talking about area, it is square units. The exponent comes after the label word. Okay, so it looks like units squared, but it's read square units. So again, quick review of those basic formulas for area, perimeter, and circumference of those basic shapes.